Hello, good afternoon, and welcome for another season of Mod Talks. I am your host for this season. I'm Stephanie Zubiri, editor of Tatler Homes. Very, very exciting to be doing this today. So, let's talk a little bit about a modularity home. So, Modularity Home was presenting the Mod Talks as the exclusive Philippine distributor of premium Italian home brands Scavolini, Valcucine, Pianca, and Elica. Modularity Home focuses its core on cabinetry and living systems that began with kitchens, the heart of the home. And established about a decade ago, the company has expanded now into bathrooms, bedrooms, wardrobes, entertainment systems, utilizing valuable elements that inject soul into each space of the home. With the brands that they carry, they continue to preserve their indelible vision of providing synergized life spaces matched with exemplary service so families can enjoy a timeless experience of function, beauty at home. So fantastic. So this is really exciting because, Mod Talks is really this a webinar series where we can learn more about design, good design, and how we apply it into our life. And it was born out of an idea to inspire and ignite interest in style design and architecture. And it's also built to encourage conversations about new design concepts and innovations that would keep all of us, so whether you're a student or someone who's just interested in design and home, and particularly industry practitioners informed and engaged. So, what's really nice is that we collaborate with different people in the industry so that we can educate and contribute insights about architecture, design, style, construction, and home improvement. So, and what's nice is that all of this is easily absorbed whether you are someone in the industry or just someone like me who is a design enthusiast. So, to talk a little bit more about what's going to happen today. So, today we have the first theme in our Mod Talks. We have the healthy home. So, we've spent a lot more time in our homes nowadays because of the pandemic. So, the home is no longer just a shell for us to live in, but we really truly live in our home. It's not somewhere we just go to sleep. Now we work at home, we study at home, and of course, how do we keep our home healthy and clean and safe? And then we're also going to discuss what exactly health means, because health is not just, of course, your physical wellness, but also your emotional and mental wellness. And we have a really, really exciting guest today, which is architect Dan Lichauco, who is one of the industry's visionaries and leading healthcare architects. So that's very interesting because how are we going to apply that to our residences, right? So we'll be definitely learning a lot of interesting things today. Now, I would like to remind and encourage everyone that you can always ask your questions, type it in the Q&A box, because we will get to that at the end of our mod talk. So if you have questions for either architect Dan Lichauco or our general manager of Modularity Home, who I'm going to introduce in a bit, Brian Hontiveros. If you have any questions, just type it in there and we'll get to it at the end. And of course, like with all Mod Talks, it's a great way to start with a bang. We will be giving out some wonderful giveaways today, some really amazing raffle prizes. We have 3 sets of hand soap and room sprays, care of Modularity Home, and a special surprise prize from architect Dan himself. It's one of his beautiful sketches. So the mechanics are very, very simple. We will choose our favorite questions. So I really encourage you guys to type in those questions, and whoever is deemed the favorites, okay, or the most interesting and thought-provoking questions will win these prizes. So please stay tuned all the way up to the Q&A and you might be our lucky winner. So without further ado, I would like to invite the General Manager of Modularity Home, Brian Hontiveros. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Steph. Thank you so much for agreeing to host our Mod Talks today. I just wanted to talk about modularity home, and then a bit about Mod Talks, how we started this. Modularity Home is a company we established around 12 years ago. So my wife and I, we figured that the Philippine market is already ready to be exposed to certain Italian brands. So we decided to bring in first Scavolini, which is the biggest kitchen brand in Italy. And I'm sure, Steph, you're very familiar with it. You use it every day. And, I thank you for trusting us with your kitchen. Um, and then we moved on to do Valcucine, which is another brand that we carry, and Pianca. Um, so, our goal is really to make people happy in the home, right? To provide certain products to make, people enjoy staying at home, especially during, this time and age, right? Mod Talks is actually, one of our pet projects that turned into something that is continuous. Everyone's staying at home. There's a lot of video on demand, like, we were talking about it earlier, like Netflix,
Yeah.
Hulu, Disney Plus. So we're that, for design people, whether it be, end users building homes or people who are just interested in design or interior designers or architects. So that's Mod Talks. It's very informal. Um, so what we do is we invite guests, normally people who I am friends with. So for this episode, we invited architect Dan Lichauco, who he likes us to call him Dan because he's very down to earth, very humble. Um, he does all these iconic projects, but the first time I met him, I was inspired because people who have so much accomplishment, sometimes they're the most humble, and a very good example of that is Dan. um, so I wanted to throw the mic back to you, Steph, to maybe do formal introductions of architect Dan Lichauco. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for joining us again here today. In case you just got on, this is the second season of Mod Talks. And today we'll be talking about the healthy home. And we have an incredible guest here today. He's a healthcare architect. So, one of the leading visionaries of the industry. We have architect Dan Lichauco. Now, he's the managing partner of Archion Architects with projects all over the Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore, Vietnam, Papua New Guinea, East Timor, the UAE, Guam, USA, and Spain. And his projects have been published in local and international magazines. He's a graduate of USCBS Architecture and has a master's degree in architecture, urban planning, and master's in architecture concentration in classical architecture and urban design from prestigious universities in the USA. He's also currently teaching architecture in University of Santo Tomas, National University, Polytechnic University of the Philippines as well. He is a founding member of the Philippine Green Building Council and is a two-time Haligi ng Dangal awardee for architecture from the National Commission on Culture and the Arts in 2017 and 2021. Wow, he just won. So congratulations. Let's welcome architect Dan Lichauco.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, Steph. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Thank you very much for that really nice introduction, and yes, please just call me Dan throughout the whole episode.
That's great. I find these things so inspiring, mainly because, it's nice to have the insight of industry professionals, even just for a homeowner, on how to maximize our home in terms of form and function. So we'll get into the meat of our conversation later. Let's talk to you a bit more, Dan, about, you started your career specializing in urban planning, hospital design, churches, and other institutions. Okay, so can you tell us what motivated you to get into this? It's a very unique niche field, right? Like something you always wanted to do when you studied architecture, or you happened upon it. Like institutional architecture is
Right.
basically it,
Well,
right?
one of the things, I was really lucky that I was able to land a job in a healthcare firm when I was in the States after grad school.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the big lessons, I apprenticed with architect Lindy Luxin right after college. And it was the time that he just finished the Sultan's Palace in Brunei. And that really opened up a lot of architects to start going abroad. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what happened was, that was, I think, in 83. Then Ninoy was shot. People, the architectural firms started shutting down, things like that. And people had to let people go. And one of the things he told me was he felt that he was really lucky that he didn't have to let people go because they started migrating abroad before the crash of 83. And that's kind of stuck to my mind. But my biggest fear is having to fire people or let people go in the office because we don't have work. And so when I got into healthcare, I always felt that people will get sick. Healthcare will always be busy. And so that's why we specialize in healthcare. One, it's exciting, it's current. Second is it's pretty stable, because if we concentrated on commercial work, then at one point in time that commercial bubble will burst, you know. And again, my biggest fear is I just don't want to let people go in the office because we don't have the work. And that's basically what drove it.
Steph, I think it's unique that, you know, an architect like Dan would think about the business side of things also, right, Dan?
Yeah, Brian, it's sorry, go ahead.
I know a lot of architects who are more on the artistic side, and then sometimes it's difficult to think of, you know, the economy and, you know, having clients, right?
Yeah, right. And it's scary because you know, when you realize that you employ people, they're dependent on paying the tuition for their children.
Of course.
They're dependent on us being able to do the work. So in the office, it's a team. I say, if I don't do my work, but you guys don't have, you can't, you know, we can't get more jobs. If you don't do your work, we can't go after more jobs. If we don't maintain a certain sense of quality, then we won't be asked to do work.
Sure. And also, you know, I think your work also trickles down to employing other people like suppliers, contractors, right? Like you have to keep contributing to the economy, because it trickles down, right? You might have the architectural firm, but then everything else under it as well. So it's interesting, because institutional architecture, if I may call it that, so it's like schools, medical facilities, or churches even, it's a very different way of designing, right? Where like you really have to blend form and function. Functionality is of such importance. So, you know, I mean, and we'll discuss that later in terms of having a healthy home, that functionality is, but you don't have to sacrifice style for function. So that's quite interesting. You've been exposed to both Philippine architecture and architecture abroad. Can you tell us what you've learned the most about these two experiences? Like, how different is it? What are the challenges perhaps in each location?
I think they're pretty much the same. I think ideas come from same places. Different designers have different ways of thinking about things. And so what's the difference, I guess, within abroad and here is the work ethic and the idea, you know, that if you're going to do something, do it once and do it correctly, right? And that's something that we have in the US or abroad, but that's something that we try to instill in the office. We have in the office, we have this pizza penalty, right? If you make a mistake and the client calls us, you buy pizza for the whole office. But then you should be, and so people will say, why are you buying pizza? It's because I did this, this, and this. Then you don't repeat the mistakes. and so what happens is it's just really understanding that in the Philippine setting, you have to get the abroad mindset, because when the Pinoys go abroad, they're behaved. They do the best job.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. Right? So, they're very well lauded abroad, right?
Right. And so we try to keep that kind of mindset here. So learning that from the US and then bringing it here, it makes it really interesting. And so what happens is the whole idea of you're a professional, and therefore as a professional, we will treat you as a professional, but you have to treat your job as a professional as well. You're not just an employee.
Yes, there's a lot of, you know, I think I find here, there's a lot of two things. The pwede na attitude, right? Yes. Like it's like pwede na yan, right? It's or not even like let's get it perfect. It's pwede na yan.
It's a pwede na and ayusin ko na lang.
Oh yeah, ayusin ko na lang. That's true. Band-Aid. It's Band-Aid solutions, right?
Right.
And the other one is there's a lack of ownership and responsibility for work, right? So they're always passing the buck to somebody else, right? So it's always like, oh, it's not my fault. It was this guy's fault because he was the tiler and he was the whatever, right? Oh, I didn't waterproof that. Someone else waterproofed it, and it wasn't me anymore. Oh my gosh, I know I built many houses. Like I built my home, I built my restaurant, I renovated and gutted my home before. Wow. And you know, I think having that abroad mindset, that's sort of like taking ownership and pride in your work and always trying to deliver the best. And you know, I think it's very inspiring, I would say, outlook on being concerned that your employees have a job, because then they feel very proud to do the work, right? They're not kind of like half
Yeah,
doing
can I
things,
keep
right?
konting yabang about the office? In the pandemic, we gave our bonuses. We gave all our bonuses last year. We
Right.
did not have to fire anybody during the pandemic. We normally give our mid-year and end of the year bonuses as a profit share. We distribute 3% of our gross income to the employees. So I think
That's
we ended
great.
up having like 14th, 15th month pay, and they were all working from home. And so
That's
what happens is,
fantastic.
it's the same. We will treat you well. We'll treat you like professionals, but we'll also expect that level of work coming through. Oh, and
Yeah.
another yabang, we have not held anybody who interned with us fail the board exam since 2004. So everybody who works in our
Wow.
passes the board exam only because we pay them a month's rent a month's salary to study. And the deal is if you fail, you buy beer for the whole office. So it's double whammy. It's mahal. You failed na nga you. And then you have to buy a beer for the office. But if you
Uh,
pass, we'll buy beer for the whole office.
Dan, I think I need tips from you because our firm is relatively younger. Um, but the idea of buying pizza and beer parang sounds so good.
Ah,
Pizza
yeah,
penalty. I like it.
yeah, it's called a pizza
Pizza.
penalty. And it's
Yeah,
like, share your mistakes and you don't be shy about your mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It's just,
Agree.
it's just shy if you repeat the mistake.
yeah,
But it's also nice to work as a team, right? So it's
Mhm.
like your mistakes, the whole team will be involved in it, or your success, the whole team will be involved in it. I think that helps also. That I think sometimes here some firms are like there's the boss and then there's just everybody else. But
yeah,
when you break the hierarchy and see everybody as an equal value to your team, because you're really only as strong as your weakest link, right? So I
yeah.
mean at the end of the day, if you see and treat everyone of equal value, equal input, then of course they can step up. They feel empowered to step up, right?
That's
Yeah,
true.
and
So
I'll give you
that's
an example. We were going after a competition, and I thought we had a good chance of winning it. It was a government competition, but our messenger sent the documents to the wrong office, right? And I told the messenger, look, so we were disqualified, right? And
I
I said,
know.
you are part of the team. Even if your job is just deliver the documents, those documents have to get there, and they have to get there on
Yeah.
time. So that's how we
It's
try
So he
to.
bought
sometimes
beer. Did
Dan's
he buy beer for everybody?
yeah.
I think he got Sabon of the Week award.
Oh no.
Sometimes such a small mistake can cause like a big impact, right?
Yes,
At
and
the end
then
of the day, as company owners, parang we take ownership, right? Even if it's someone in our team who made the mistake, diba? Parang it's still on us.
yes. In
Yes.
fact, in the office, we have paid for mistakes. If I like to think our reputation in the office, if it's not our mistake, we will fight it. But if it's our mistake, we will defend it. And so we have made
Yeah.
errors in certain projects, and we told the clients, "Yeah, sure, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it."
Yeah,
Right? And
Yeah.
one of the things about the office is we don't get commissions from anybody. And the nice thing about that is it allows us to ask favors from the contractors when we make mistakes.
that's true.
Say, hey,
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
made a mistake. Can you just fix this for us? Don't charge the owner. And it kind of
Yeah.
worked out.
And that's great because that's all a homeowner wants, right? It'd be like, please just fix this. You don't want to hear a ton of excuses. All we
Right.
want is like for the professional to come in and be like, I have a solution, right? I don't need an excuse. I need a solution.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about your work. So you've done so much amazing work here in the Philippines and abroad. But what do you feel is your most iconic or most impactful design?
Well, Bobby Manyosa used to say, and I stole this from him. I was his partner. I stole this from him, and I said the next one, right? But of course, we'll have favorites. And I think
Yeah.
the Halingin ng Dangal Award, the Our Nice House, was one of my favorites. Only because the owner allowed us to just have so much fun in the project. Right? The other one was a house we did in La Vista, which is for a mom and a daughter, where the things came together. And yeah, this is the Haligi ng Dangal Award, which is a modern take on the Bahay na Bato. And the reason why it's my favorite is one, we had the freedom to do a lot of fun things. The interiors here we were done by Chelo Hofilenya, but it also allowed us to explore ways of taking architecture further. And so we wanted to do Filipino architecture. And so this is a modern take on the Bahay na Bato.
Nice. Yeah, I like that sort of like the second floor um ironworks that you
Yeah.
usually see in the
Yeah,
Bayan of
they're
Bato.
called ventanillas, and they're in the
Mm-hmm.
traditional bahay na bato that allows you floor to ceiling ventilation. And these are tricks that were done years and years ago that we're just
Yeah.
readapting and making
Which
it.
is also usually much more sustainable in terms of energy and everything as well, right? Because, these homes were built before without air conditioning, so that the way the ventilation, the flow of air, all of these things were. It's nice that we're looking to the past and then bringing these learnings to the
I
future.
think Dan's, his experience is he was a partner with the Manyosa group, and then he also studied in the US. Parang it's such a diverse level of experience. And then we talked about Dan focusing on hospitals and healthcare design, but then little do we know that he also does houses. That's actually how I met Dan, because we worked on some houses together. Yeah.
Oh, I have a question then. Like, this is a little bit off script, but how difficult is it for an architect to work with a client who maybe doesn't have the same aesthetic as you, but
Oh,
wants your input and like, right? May ganon, diba? Like, that's your architect, and then but it's not the right aesthetic, but you're already
yeah.
signed on. Like, is
We'll,
it?
yeah, we'll try 3 times. And then on the third time, we'll just say whatever you want. It's as simple as that. And my philosophy is it's your house, right? And so
Yeah.
we will try 3 times. We will give 3 options. We'll go up to 3. I remember Lindy said, I never show my clients more than 1 option because it confuses them, right? And that's something I really learned. So he would just really show 1 option, and this is the option. Come here, we'll try 3 times. And then if not, then we'll just say, tell me what you want, and we'll make it better.
Yeah.
That's a nice answer. I like that. Tell me what you want and we'll make it better. That's great. Um, so I have a question. So nowadays things are really evolving. Does your approach designing like bigger projects, residential projects, like has it evolved? Have you had to make a lot of changes to the way you conceptualize your spaces?
No, this will sound really corny, but I think every time we start something new, it really starts from the site. And literally, the
Mm-hmm.
site will talk to you and say, this is what has to be done. The Arnai's house was on a corner lot. And so, but it wasn't 90 degrees. So we did one side parallel to one street and the other side, another floor parallel to the front street. And it created this triangular silong space that just naturally occurred. And
Yeah.
so when you talk, and that's a silong space, the ground floor is perpendicular to one Luna and the other side is perpendicular to Melantic. And so what happened is it just took the shape of the lot to begin to determine the shape of the house. And since it was a corner lot, it had 5-meter easements. And so we decided to do a front garden versus a back garden because the back garden would be tiny, right? And take advantage of the five
Yeah.
meter easement. So a lot of it really, the site really starts talking to you, right? And then from there, you now input the requirements of the clients. And we've had a lot of really interesting house clients. As an example, but in the years of making houses, I found out that there are 3 kinds of people. Steph, tell me who you are. The first one will not throw anything away. And so we did this client,
Okay.
and she said, I need space for my disco boots from the 70s. And it was still there, right? The
Mhm.
second one, and most of the people would do the 1-year rule. I don't use it for 1 year or 2 years, I'll give it away. The best client, and I think Brian, your closets will look fantastic with this person, was he would buy a pair of shoes and he would give away a pair of shoes. So he would buy a shirt, then he
Ah,
would give away a shirt. So what we did is in his closet, we actually notched the bar so that's 1.5 inch apart,
Yeah.
right? Because he had exact finite numbers, so it looked good all the time. It looked really neat. It looked really
oh
OC.
man.
And with Brian's
I'm
glass closets, that just looked fantastic.
I
That's
am like the opposite. I'm a super hoarder.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you're number one.
we
the
had to
number one.
we had to like frost we had to frost like the glass cabinets in the kitchen because I like the idea of glass, but I was like, I don't know if like my spice cabinets are gonna look good. Like, so the photo I posted on Instagram, if you guys want to check it out, at Stephanie Zubiri, my last photo up there is my Scavallini kitchen. So we frosted the glass so you can still see, and I have all my stuff there. However, I do have like beautiful plate collection, like a beautiful plate collection. So my everyday plates, those are clear glass, so you can see
Okay.
immediately like, oh, the glasses are there because they still look nice. They stack up nice. But my spices, my gosh, I go whenever I go abroad to another country, like I hoard. I have all kinds of shishimi from Japan and like, oh my gosh, sumac from Turkey. When it's all there, and I hardly throw it out. So yeah, even my closets, like for my clothing, they can't be clear. They cannot.
The sentimental
Can't.
value, or like souvenir
No,
sometimes,
you know
right?
what? Um, I'm a serial purchaser. Like if I like something, I'll buy it in multiples and different
Colors.
colors and
Yeah.
variations. But I do chuck a whole like a chunk, but I do it like maybe twice a year. I'll get a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't used or my style has changed and my maids are having like a heyday. All my yayas are like, yay, they have like all just we have so many people at home and my kids also. So we have some,
Steph,
but
I,
it's a
I remember when you were before you moved in, and then all your stuff were like in one room, and then we were doing a
oh my
meeting,
god.
and then you showed it to me. Dami, yeah. But
Yeah, and
Damn
yeah,
it.
Dan,
and
I
that's
think
yeah.
sometimes it's
Sorry.
not just clothes, but like for example,
Oh,
you collect Legos, right?
right.
How do you put like Legos? And my daughter started to do Legos, so we've been trying to do that too. How do we curate it in such a way that you have nice shelving and nice libraries, and then you put the Legos? Parang it's sometimes it's not easy to match.
I know it's easy because I collect architecture Legos, so that's fun. That's easy, And it's also actually buy two. I'll build one. I'll sell the other one 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So because if you look at there's a study that the price of Lego actually goes much higher than the price of gold. Right.
Tama.
So
Really?
yeah, it's insane. It's an insane
You know,
reselling market. But
I have a
but
lot of sentimental stuff. Parang I'm like that, like things from my lola that I get, like handbags from my lola that I don't really use, but then I feel like bad if I give it away
and that's what
or,
we do.
you
Yeah,
know.
that's what we do as designers. Steph. We're not no judgment. We're like your doctor.
Yeah.
We'll see you naked, stuff like that. It's like tell me what you like, and we'll do well with it. Example, no, if you're
All
makalat,
the skeletons in my closet,
Right.
yeah,
you'll hide them.
right. But if you're makalat, right, when we'll design your drawers like 5 centimeters deep, so you don't have layers of kalat. So instead of building 3 drawers, we'll build 5 or 6, right?
So to be honest, that's why I love my Scavolini kitchen because if there's one place I like things to be really organized, it has to be the kitchen because I cook for myself. I cook for my kids, I cook for my home, I cook for my friends. I really like to cook. So I needed to know exactly where everything is, right? And one of the challenges that I had was I actually wanted like my stove is in the island, right? So because my friends are sitting in front of me while I cook, or my kids, they have like a little counter there and I'm cooking facing them. However, when I used to cook, I used to have all my spices beside me. But where do you put it now that it's all open? How and I need them like at reach. So we actually came up with a drawer that's right beside me that fits exactly. I don't know how many of those McCormick spices bottles, right? Like across. So when you pull it out, you've got them all lined up perfectly and it's not
But yes,
makalat
but
on the
are they
counter.
alphabetically arranged?
No, not the one. But it's more like which is the one that I use the most that's
Okay,
out first, right?
because we've
Yeah.
done that. Yeah, we've done that. Everything's alphabetically arranged. Oh, this other guy, this other client we had, he had 30 shirts or 31 shirts, and he would wear that shirt on the day of the month. So if it's Jan 5, he will wear shirt number 5. If he wore, and I said, why do you do this? It prevents him from thinking about stuff. And that's exactly your kitchen, right? It prevents you
Yeah.
from wasting time looking for stuff. And so customizing kitchens, customizing closets are actually key because they should be like a good tailor, an architect will actually
Yeah.
tailor fit all of these. Like when we do closets, we measure the reach of the husband and wife.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
if the wife is a
That's
lot shorter than the
specific.
husband, she gets more layers.
Yeah.
Right?
The
Yeah,
hanger rod
that's
should
true
be
because
lower.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
hanger.
Yeah. So we'll measure the
So
reach, we'll measure their shirt length. So even our dimensioning of the closets are very custom to the user.
Yeah. That's
I
true.
also had like so in my kitchen, I love these like really heavy cast iron pots, right? That are actually very difficult to store because not only are they heavy, so they're hard to move around. So when you stack them up, they're hard to reach actually on a shelf, right? To pull them out and everything. But what Scavallini and Brian and them did for me was they made like a very deep but open drawer. So you can see from the sides
Yeah.
and from the top And I am so impressed with that drawer because that stuff is heavy. Like maybe one pot is 1 to 2 kilos, right? And they're all stacked up there. There must be at least 20 kilos of pots in one drawer. And the mechanism has not budged. Like it's still so smooth, it still glides. So, high usage areas like the bathroom, the kitchen, and your closet should really be quality in terms of the hinges and all the finishings. Oh my God, that's the worst. Is when you open the cabinet and the door pulls out, like, what happened? Right? The hinge comes off, like, oh no, and then it falls.
And that's what we
Never, it's
tell,
never
and that's what we
aligned
tell our
again.
clients. At the end of the day, you pay for what you get, what you pay for,
Yeah.
right? You want to replace your kitchen parts every 3-4 years, okay lang, di ba? We want to keep it and to last, then this is the kind of product that you should be looking for.
Yeah.
In hospitals, I'll give you a tip. We every time elbows touch a counter, right? Because that will eventually wear down the laminate or the paint. We always use stone because we know that area
Yeah.
gets beaten up, no? And so we translate that to the houses. Anytime that can get beaten up, and sometimes I had a client who called it kamay na bakal ng maid ng katulong, because they will basically destroy stuff. I don't know why, but it happens. And so what happens is you have to understand how all of that works, and we translate it to our houses. Like in our hospitals, we don't put any handles because people in the public hospitals, they'll steal those handles,
Mhm.
right? So what we do is we open
Oh,
an overlip so that the
of
door
course.
is
Yeah.
bigger, so you can do an overlip, so the door becomes your handle. And we translate that into the houses as well. It's not being judgmental or something, but it's understanding how people use their particular
Use,
spaces, and
of
particularly if
course.
it's not theirs. Because if it's yours, you're much
Yes,
more careful. But when it's not yours,
definitely.
people have a tendency to become less careful.
Yeah.
That's very true. And also just I mean, the way the house works. I mean, even just with my children, my goodness, I have two really like high energy boys, and they
Okay.
love the kitchen. So they're always, what the child does, right? They open and close things, open and close, open and close. My gosh, if I didn't have like good cabinets in the kitchen, they would all be like warped already and
Mhm.
broken, because the amount of times my son like makes halongkat things and pulls them out like that, right? So it's so important to invest in that, in these high traffic areas, high usage areas in the home,
Right.
right? I'm gonna pause for a minute and invite everybody here to answer this poll question, okay? So which part of the home is the most important for you to keep clean and sanitize? So this is our poll question for today. So kitchen, mudroom slash entrance, bedroom, and bathroom. Okay, so please answer your poll question, and then we'll read them out after. So what about you guys? What do you think? Dan, Brian, what is the most important space to be kept clean?
I I think right now, we when we order stuff, it goes to the side entrance where my kitchen is. So, we
Mm-hmm.
kind of created like a system in our house wherein, the person gets it from the gate and then brings it to the side, and then we clean it up first and then it goes to the kitchen. So for me, it's actually the kitchen. But I've seen a lot
Yeah.
of houses, and then you can chime in, wherein they were designing it pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic happened, and then now they're adding mud rooms, and like maybe in hospitals before you enter the surgery room, there's another room to sanitize.
Antechamber, like an
Yeah.
antechamber to clean up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things is this, like if you're talking about really the healthy home, one of the things that this pandemic learned is air conditioning can become really dirty.
Yeah.
And
Oh
so
yeah.
the more you can just let natural light in and natural air through your house, which the bahay na bato and the ventanillas just really work nicely, will make it cleaner and healthier. But for me, the room that could be the major source of, let's say, pathogens or salmonella or E. coli would be the kitchen and the bathroom.
Kitchen, Baran, yeah,
And the kitchen and the
for
bathroom
sure.
should be something that you can actually keep clean. Um, Quick poll to everybody listening. How many here close the toilet lid when they flush? Right? Because technically you're supposed to close the lid when you flush, because when you flush and you don't close the lid, then
Yeah.
it aerosolizes the pee and the poo.
Uso
right?
Oh
yun
my God.
aerosolized na yan.
Right. And
Oh,
3.5 meter blast radius, huh, from the
what?
toilet bowl. It's calculated. There's actually
Oh
calculated.
my
So it's
gosh, that's so gross.
so if your toothbrush is right beside the cubeta and you're not closing the lid when you
Yeah.
flush, then I don't know what you're brushing
Yeah.
your mouth with, right? You're
So
brushing your
you
teeth.
know what though? There's an interesting study that says, and it's if you just Google it, it's your toilet seat is actually cleaner than your laptop or your electronics.
Yes.
And yeah, so that is, and your kitchen sponge. Your kitchen sponge is one of the dirtiest things in your house. You have to throw them out usually weekly. I mean, I don't really do that, but that's what they say. You're supposed to throw it out weekly. But yeah, so apparently your toilet seat is actually cleaner than we forget that our, I mean, now that I think about it, I have to probably clean my phone because I don't remember the last time I cleaned it. Or like my laptop is
No,
probably
but
super dirty
yeah,
and
yeah.
disinfect, right?
Other things, simple things like if you buy a toilet bowl that's wall hung, then you can clean underneath the bowl and you don't get the edges of gunk. And I'm sorry, guys miss. Guys are pigs, right? I'm a guy, we miss, right? And so a lot of the houses we do, we're actually putting urinals with lids, right?
Yeah.
And the wives just thank me for it after. They go, "Thank you for very much for forcing me to put a urinal in the master's bathroom," and the wives just
Yeah.
love us for it. But one of the things, I'll give you a cute trick also. You can buy these toilet bowl brushes that has a container,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If you keep that in every bathroom and you fill it up with Lysol and water, and when you
Yeah.
have to, once you have a guest or make a stain on the bowl and you have to brush it down, it kind of freshens up the whole bathroom.
Yeah.
For
you
sure.
know
For
so if
sure.
you keep that, and then the trick is also you're not supposed to use the bathroom mop in the kitchen. You have a separate mop
Yeah.
for the kitchen, you have a
Yes.
separate mop
Yes.
for the bathroom. And because
Even the rags, right? The
yeah,
cleaning rags, your ano,
r- r-
um basahan, right?
mhm,
Your basahan,
yeah,
you need to have one in the kitchen, one in the bathroom. Can't be all the same.
right. And if you
What
can,
about
it's actually better. And once you get to the habit, you'll know that you're not transporting one kind of dirt to the other kind of dirt to other parts of the
sure,
house.
Yeah.
for sure. And the thing with the kitchen though is you can attract pests as well, right? So keeping your kitchen clean and sanitized as much as possible to minimize. Of course, here in the Philippines, my God, our flying ipis is everywhere. No matter how clean you keep it, you still manage to see them somehow. But as much as possible, right? We try our best not to attract these pests and to make sure that they stay away. Okay, before we move on to our next, I would say, segment of our talk, I want to re-encourage everybody to please ask questions in the Q&A box. So far, I only see there are 4 questions here. And do leave your name. Don't be anonymous so that you can have a chance to win our raffle prizes. So again, just reminding you guys, we have 3 amazing prizes, 3 gift sets of hand soap and room spray for Modularity Home, and 1 surprise gift from architect Dan himself, one of his sketches. So please, I encourage you guys, ask your questions. We'll get to it at the end of the talk. All the Q&As, we'll try to answer everything, and the best, most insightful, thought-provoking questions will be chosen as the winner. So please don't forget. I see 128 participants out there today. Thank you again for joining us. And I want to see more of those questions coming in. All right. So as we move on, you know, are there any sort of design elements that we can think of when creating our space that can be applied to the home as well? So I know you work heavily with PGH and other hospitals. Like, what can we integrate? What are the things that we can integrate in our home, in a home setting?
I
Um,
think
I
go
think
ahead.
Sorry, yeah. It's one of the things is everybody, whether you know it or not, has a process. Whether you're aware of
Mm-hmm.
this process or not, it's as an example. No, when we talk to clients, and we get really personal, right? When you go to the shower, do you take your underwear to the ones you're gonna wear into the bathroom, or you to go out undressed and then put it in the dressing room or things
Yeah.
like that? So once you really think about it, everybody has a process, and this process is kind of set. And so the big tip, if you're designing your own spaces, you have to understand what is my process and tell your designer that this is my process. I put my shoes in the bed. I sit down in the bed and I put my shoes there, right? Or I leave my shoes outside in the mudroom or in the front room. But the job of the designer is not supposed to say, this is how you have to do it. But the job of the designer is to say, let me understand how you want to use the space and we will design it for you. And that's exactly the same thing with hospitals. Every hospital has a different operating culture. Every hospital might do the same procedure, but in different ways. And our job is to understand how each particular hospital will begin to do things. But sometimes also we have to change the culture. And maybe we'll say, hey, maybe there's a better way of doing this, right? So there's a better way. Steph, you cook, right? Do you do all your
Yes.
food prep first, or do you
Yes,
do?
it's very important. Flow is
Right?
important in the kitchen. I find that, some poorly designed kitchens have the stove too far away from the water source, for example, right? Like, when you need to toss out the water of the pasta or get some water or rinse something, or you're taking out like a dirty dish, you at least for me, it's behind me. So I've designed it with Brian and them to make sure that the stove is here, and as soon as I turn around, it's right there. It's so I lived in France for quite a long time, about 7 years, and my apartment in Paris is very small. I had a little student flat there, and I think like a 40 or 30 square meter apartment, and my kitchen was tiny, but it was very efficient. Cook, clean, ref. I didn't have to move, right? It was like cook, clean, ref, serve. It was like an open kitchen. So when I actually moved here to a more comfortable space with a larger kitchen, I was a little bit frazzled because why it was so far. The access to the fridge was far. Like it didn't flow. So when I finally had the opportunity to design my own space, even if the kitchen space was large, I kept all the functional things close to each other. My spices are here, my ref is there, because then you have to think about the flow. Like you were saying, when you wake up, where do you go? What's the first thing you do? And that's how you do. And everyone's different, right? Some
Yeah, I'll
people
give you
may
an
not even
example.
use their kitchen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're redoing a kitchen in one of my clients in Forbes, right? And she cooks, but she doesn't cook all the time. Of course, they have cooks, right? Then I literally went there and I said, I went to the cook and the maids. Your mom and dad, di kayo binigyan ng star margarine, no? Kasi hindi kayo masyadong matangkad, right? Then they started laughing, but the result is the work counter is 5 centimeters shorter than the other counters.
Yeah.
And it's
It's more
understanding that, right?
comfortable.
And if
You're
you look at
not
the
chopping
average
like
height,
this. You're
and,
like
and
that.
if you
Yeah.
look at the average height of the Filipina who works in these types of kitchens, 5 centimeters is significant. And so we now redesigned it to adjust the heights to the people who use it. Then I said, wait a minute, what if they get really tall maids? I go, I don't think we're going to get really tall maids in the future. But their staff has been with them for 20 years. No?
Yeah.
So that's why
Yeah.
we can now design it for their staff. And it's really, it sounds really funny, but one of the things, and particularly teaching in PUP versus UST versus LaSalle versus National University, is at one point in time, you really have to get the people to understand is you have to be able to put yourselves in the shoes of the people you're designing for, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember we're in one of my projects in National University, we're doing a super high-end condo. But then the hardest thing was getting my students to think like they were rich, right? And in the same way, when I was teaching in LaSalle, I did a class in LaSalle, it's trying to get them to think like they were not as fortunate as they were, things like that. And it's the ability for a designer to bring yourselves into the shoes of the people you're designing for that actually makes good design.
Yeah.
For sure. And here we have so many people living in our homes with us. And I always ask their opinion on where they want to, like in our staff area. Like they had total input on what goes where, because that's where where they would live, or even the laundry area. Where do you think is, so you really have to integrate all your audience. It doesn't matter what your audience is or who they are, but
Right.
whatever you design, you have to take into account their needs and their workflow.
And their habits.
Brian, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you have any inputs, Brian, on sort of what systems modularity home might have that can help integrate all these things that we've been talking about?
Yeah, sure. There are a lot of different systems, that we have. One of them that's quite unique is what we call the Scavellini utility system. And I think I
Mm-hmm.
have some photos that we can share with you guys. But basically, for clients who have PWDs at home, we have this system wherein it's custom built in terms of height, in terms of function, right? So the overhead cabinets above, you can open it and then you can pull down the mechanism. Or
Actually, Brian, I was super excited when I saw this
yeah.
because when we do one of the things about people who are disabled or were very able then become disabled is the
Mhm.
idea that they get so depressed because they can't do things that they did before.
Yes.
And
True.
systems like this, if you have a client or somebody who just had a stroke or cannot walk or or some disease that puts them in a wheelchair, it's
Yes.
just not the ease of use, but the whole idea that they can do stuff for themselves makes them
Yes.
actually better, and it makes them heal faster.
Yeah.
And
The
so
purpose,
we do
right?
this.
Being able to be self-sufficient. Yeah.
And we actually do similar things like this in the hospitals. It's called activities for daily living,
Yeah.
wherein we actually train people to go back to be able to do their activities for daily living, the things they used to do before the stroke, before the heart attack,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
before the nabalian ng kamay and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And these are great. And I think these are really fun, interesting systems. And it's applicable to even an aging population,
Hmm.
right? If you have an older mother or grandparents who's staying with you and they still want to be mobile and things like that, then
And they
this
love to cook.
actually helps out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like in this particular one, you see the baseboards. Usually they're just baseboards, right? But
Mhm.
in this system, they're actually drawers that are resting on the floor.
Easily.
And then the oven is right on top of it. Because when we bake, it has to be chest height, right? But when you're
Right.
on a wheelchair, that's the perfect height. So that's what the brands that we work with, specifically Scavallini, that's what they do. They think of specific things. It's not just all about aesthetic. Um, so yeah, I think Dan, maybe one of these days, if you have a project, maybe a hospital wherein we can do something like this, it would be an exciting project, right? I
In
think.
fact, no, we do,
Yeah.
because the rehab facilities will require systems like this,
Yeah.
right? Of course, we can build that, and then they modify their houses. But it's really a way of understanding that the loss of mobility is not only physically debilitating, but it's also emotionally debilitating.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we have to make sure that these facilities work well to transition as you
Yes.
get better and better. We want to make sure our spaces make you better, not our spaces don't make you worse or more ill.
Yeah. That's true.
You know, just a sort of like I would say to draw a parallel. It's kind of like the Montessori way of living in a room for kids, right? So if you do like the Montessori style bedroom for a child, everything is at the child's level. The bed is on the floor, the cabinetry and everything is at also the child's level, so that you can teach independence. You can empower the child. So it's the same with somebody who might have a handicap, and it's like you're empowering them to do these things for themselves by making it accessible, right?
Yeah.
So
And
that's
yeah,
it.
and sorry, go ahead. No, and then
Go
there's
ahead.
another thing which was also interesting, and I think Brian has this gym system that's in the wall, right? The wall gym system.
Yes.
It's really interesting. Let me ask you guys, right? You've been working from home for the longest time, for over a year. But do you realize that you have a work personality and a home personality, and they're two distinct
Yeah.
personalities, right? And the commute from work allowed you to transition your mind to say, okay, I'm no longer in work mode, I'm in house mode, so I will not act like a manager, right? But Brian, if you went home and you acted like a manager, your wife will kill you, right? Exactly, because you
She's
have your
beside me. She's beside me now.
she'll literally
He's the
kill you.
boss.
Right.
Yeah, she's
But
the
if you
boss.
took home that personality and you didn't have the commute transition, where you change your personality, change your mindset, it's I'm ready home, I'm no longer the manager, my wife is the boss, right? So therefore you don't get it. And that's what this whole quarantine thing kind of destroyed.
Yeah.
And it allows you the space not just to do other things, but the spaces, and I think you should we flash that system on the gym system,
Yeah.
right? It allows you to create some time in spaces that are not necessarily used for a gym, like in the bathroom and stuff like that, so that you can take that commute transition, which is very, very important to you, so that
Yes.
when you get home, you're sane. And I remember I would tell people, I hope you're safe. They'll say, I hope you're safe. I'll say, well, I hope you're safe and sane, because
Yeah.
sanity
That's
here
the
is
harder. That's the
totally
harder part.
is the
Staying.
harder part, right?
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
and let me give you
Yeah.
something. This is kind of nerdy, historical, nerdy academic stuff, right? The Bahay Kubo was originally a one-room house, right? When you made latag your banig, it became the bedroom. When you sat
Yeah.
on the table and you ate there, it became the dining room. When you had guests over, it became the living room, right? And systems like this are just like that. It's what you put in the room that begin to change the room. And the whole idea of living room, dining room. I did a house where I literally couldn't name a room anymore. They had so many rooms, we ran out of names. She had a mahjong room, she had a library, she had a music room, she had a
Wow.
theater, and stuff like that. I go, wait a minute, I'm running out of names, right?
Yeah.
But then when you look at things wherein it goes back to the whole idea that it's what you put in the room that changes the function of the room. And
Yeah.
Also,
understanding flexibility will give you
your
that mindset of doing a million other things in your spaces.
your perspective, right? I mean, if you think about most people are not fortunate to have so many rooms, right? Like, I mean, when I was a student, I lived in one room. One room was that was it, right? And many people live this way. Or but we can look at perhaps Japan and the way they have their rooms. They don't really traditional Japanese homes, right? Have don't necessarily have different rooms. It's
Right.
just like that. It's one big space that is transformed throughout the day. So you have your tatami mat and some maybe some sliding doors and sliding panels. And that transforms the energy. It's you yourself. What is your perception of the room? That's why sometimes they say don't bring your laptop to bed, because then
Yeah.
you lose your place of refuge, right? Like even just moving from your bed to your dining table, or moving your bed to your to a counter in your kitchen, so that you don't have that work mindset in a place where you're supposed to get rest and relaxation to be able to cut off. Since we're on the topic, maybe you can give suggestions in small spaces on how to have that sort of work commute, like for someone living in a one bedroom apartment or in a studio. What suggestions can you have to have that sort of shift, if you don't have a
Yeah.
home office?
Yeah. And I really thought about that because, I'm fortunate. I live with my parents. We have a garden, but what about somebody who's stuck in a studio, right? And how do you make things work? Well, first of all, you have to make sure you can get out once in a while. But
Hmm.
simple trick, right? I'll give you an example. If you were in a one bedroom or you're in a studio and the whole house is magulo, right? And your bed is magulo,
Yeah.
your
Mm.
room is magulo.
Yeah.
But if you
Your
just fix
mind
your
becomes
bed,
magulo.
yeah. But if you just fix your
Mm.
bed, maski na it's all makalat, left, right, and in front of you, your room is clean, right? And so what
Mm.
happens is take that whole concept of the big items, if they look neat, it can begin to change the transition. So I've told people, when you're working, you work on your desk, right? When you're not working, get a nice blanket and just cover all your junk on the desk, or just something so you hide away the work stuff. Or you put your pencils and your pads in a drawer and you put out a vase of flowers, right? Or
That's
something that you
nice.
can look at.
Yeah.
And so again, it goes back to the one room house, the Bahay Kubo. It's like what you put in it will change the whole feel, right? So as an example, work mode, you have background music or no background music. When you're in at home mode in the same room, you turn on the background music, dim the lights,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then make sure that you have,
Lighting, that's good. That's a good
yeah,
idea. Maybe like top
and you,
light for work
right, and then
and
task
ambient
lighting,
light.
ambient,
Yeah.
or and then you have to transition, even auditory transition. So no noise, no background noise during work time, and then background music or CNN or the latest Korean telenovela is blasting in the background when you're not at work. And
Mhm.
all of that sends clues that helps your body adjust and say, I'm no longer at work. And it's really this whole transition of work to no work that makes a difference. I'll let you know. I think we've lost about 3 or 4 people in the office because they literally said, "Sir, I just look at the screen and I cannot do anything. I'm just looking at the screen the whole day." I said, "Yeah, I think you should take a break." And that's something that's very real. And the ability
Yeah.
to transform your spaces because you are changing what you have to do,
Yeah.
right? In the office, we try not to text people after 6, try to keep the
Mhm.
hours kind of your hours or those hours. But you can do that to your spaces as well, both in terms of lighting, in terms of accessories, and in terms of sound
Yeah.
Fantastic.
and
I like
smell
that actually.
and smell.
And smell.
Yeah, light a scented candle.
Candle. right?
That's
It could be
that's very
gumamela during work mode and tobacco and gin during not work mode. Can you
or
get tobacco and gin?
just drink the gin. Can I drink the
Yeah.
gin on the not work mode? Pour myself a cocktail. Now I'm not
Right.
at work.
Yeah. But then even
Yeah.
small spaces, if you do the right thing, you can transition away from this tight kind of feeling, which is what we do in our hospitals as well. In our hospitals, the number one rule in every hospital we do is every bedroom has to have a window, period.
Mm.
Right? Because if you're in a windowless room and you can't see the sun rise and set, you can't see if it's raining outside, how are you going to get well? Right?
Sure.
And that's the same thing with your spaces. Make sure that you can feel the transition of time in your spaces. So if you're work mode, make sure the windows open so you can see if it's raining outside. You know, if you can see if it's magulo or it's nighttime, so it's nighttime na, then I have to stop working. And it's allowing
Well,
that transition of time into your spaces.
energy, time, and basically having being connected to your environment, right? And listening to your circadian rhythm. All of this is really important to our overall health and wellness, which is, health in the end is not just about physical health, but also mental and emotional health. And I like the idea of like a clean space gives you a clean mind, right? And I want to discuss more about cleaning the home, like not just, of course, sometimes we need energy cleansing, but in general, when we feel like we are in a clean home, in a clean space, when we walk into that I like that idea of like making your bed, because it also relaxes the mind. So let's talk a little bit about health and cleanliness together. Of course there's the emotional mental aspect that we talked upon, but of course there's the physical aspect of a clean home, especially now where we're constantly like disinfecting our surfaces. I mean, I'm a lover of natural grain wood, and some very porous like marble stuff in the house, and then now suddenly it's like, oh my god, Lysol everywhere, spray everything, right? Maybe we can talk about what materials that we can use nowadays to for a seamless cleaning of the house.
Sure. I think I can take this one, Steph, and then Dan, you can comment. One of the brands that we carry is called Valcucine, and
Mm-hmm.
their focus is actually glass,
Yes.
and also special mechanisms inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. So these countertops, they look plain, right? But these are actually glass countertops. So with glass, it can withstand like 90% alcohol. You can really clean it up. Um, Also, it's very strong. This has a aluminum structure underneath, so that when something falls on it, our demo in the showroom is a 2 kilogram ball. We drop it off on the counter,
Wow.
and it sort of just bounces, right? So glass is something that we encourage people to use nowadays, not just for the doors, which the doors. It's been normal to use glass for the doors, but now we push it a step further. We push the envelope and we use glass for the countertops, right? So
Wow.
other than that, Valcucine is all about recyclability and the green environment, pushing that agenda. I think, Dan, you're in the forefront of that here in the Philippines, but it's not really as important yet compared to first world countries.
No,
But
no, I think it's very important. And I think if
yeah,
people can afford it, they should be able
yes,
to do that. Because what happens is, you know the old saying, you are what you eat,
yes,
right?
Mm.
And so, but if you're preparing your food in a surface that's not that clean, or a surface that cannot take the solvents, the Lysol, the
yeah,
Domex, the Pine Sol and stuff like that. I'll give you an example. How many here opened their sink, the cabinet under their sink, and it's
Oh
musty,
god,
it's moldy?
it's
Everybody,
awful.
right?
Yeah.
And
yes,
that's because the water, it really doesn't drip, it's not wet, but there's so much moisture in the air that the wood absorbs it, and the wood is never allowed to dry. And once
yes,
and eventually the wood gets soggy and icky and begins to smell, then attracts the apis, right?
yeah,
and
correct.
and that's key. It's before the modular kitchens came in, everybody was precasting their concrete kitchens, diba?
Yeah,
It would be a precast
um,
or a cast in place concrete kitchen, and then you put the doors, na duko, and then
yeah,
the hinges and stuff like
Yes.
that, right? But eventually, none of those systems lasted. And despite the fact that it was concrete, the EPIs will grow into the cracks of the concrete.
They will mate in the
Yeah. And bring their friends. Like, hey, friends, check it out here. You know?
party.
Yeah, they'll have a party
No
under your
matter,
sink.
right? They really find a way. My goodness.
Right.
Wow.
And systems like this, and it doesn't have to be the whole system. It can just be, you can be judicious about it. The parts that get wet, use the system. The parts that are not, if you're in a budget, you can do a combination of both systems.
Engineered wood. Yeah. Correct.
And again, being judicious about things and understanding the limitations of the materials. And that's what's interesting. And that's why I love going to Brian's kitchen. It's like, oh my God, this is new. I can play with this. You know, and there's a lot of little tricks of the trade that you're there that you can always discover new things every time you go there.
We really try to specialize in what we do because, you know, it's so tempting sometimes to keep adding, you know, products and selling more stuff, you know, from tiles to lights to wallpaper. You know, it's easy already because we already have that network, right? But we still try to specialize in what we do, which is cabinet systems, kitchens, bathrooms, closets.
Right, and not for anything. It's, I mean, I've been doing work before systems like this came into place, right? And before we had to draw every single thing, right? Now it's available, it's still customizable, and it can work within it. And it actually reduced a lot of work for us as the architects and the designers. I don't have to draw all of this. I'll just say, hey, Brian, just take care of it, right? And then.
No, but I think what's amazing is the materials, right? Because again, I will reiterate, I have two little boys. Their fingers are always dirty. I mean, you know, children, their markers, their crayons, their whatever. And I have white kitchen cabinets, right? Yeah. But you know, you can imagine in the old style with the wood and duco finish, eventually it chips or all the stains that are very hard to remove. So having, particularly in the kitchen where, you know, your hands might be dirty, maybe you're chopping something, then you have to suddenly open the door. You need surfaces that are easy to clean, but also that don't necessarily absorb also the harsh chemicals of the cleaning products, right? You want to be able to wipe. So maybe after disinfecting with the Lysol, you might want to wipe that Lysol away because you don't necessarily want to eat your Lysol, right? So having good surface materials, especially in a place where you will ingest things like in the kitchen, is very, very important.
And that also goes to fabrics. And this is again something we learned in healthcare. We will not specify any fabric that doesn't have at least 50,000 double rubs. 50,000 is you do this 50,000 times before the tela gets pud. You know, and when you look at the technical aspects of the fabric and its ability to accept solvents, sometimes we'll say to a client, you know, for your outdoor porch where your dogs are, where it's fun, invest in this more expensive fabric. But look at this, it says 50,000 double rubs. That means your dog can scratch 50,000 times before he makes spoon it, the tela, right? Yeah. And so that's basically understanding that you can translate institutional kind of thinking into the house and also vice versa. And so institutional kind of thinking just allows us to make our other products better. You know, things like that.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about livability because, you know, nowadays, again, as we mentioned earlier, the home is not just a place where you sleep in. We do everything now. So whether that's exercise, you know, our meetings like this, I'm doing this from my house. I'm sure all of you are also at home, you know, our work. I want to talk about sort of how can we keep our spaces sort of organized and still pleasant despite all the things that we've packed into it, right? Like we work out, but we also work, and then there's the school, and do you have any tips on how to, you know, make things that function, that seamless flow of the different lifestyles we lead now in our home, but still stylish, right? How do we do that?
One of the nice things is there's all these bins that are available and they look nice, no? But one of the things when you start putting things in these bins, in these plastic containers, is you have to ask yourself, what will I use most and what will I use least, right? And then that's where you put the most use within reach and the least use in the upper shelves, and that level of organization, right? I've done cabinets where when we're finished, I have a client, I really liked him, he was really a lot of fun. So we alphabetized his CDs. We literally alphabetized his CDs and we fixed it in a genre. But then he came back and said, just change the order. So why? Because I don't listen to this part so much, but I listen to these. So we alphabetized what he listens to a lot, and we put away what he doesn't. And so it's again understanding how you as an individual begin to live in your spaces, and the designer's ability to understand how you live in those spaces and make it better
True.
for you. We'll never get it right all the time, but it's always nice to test things and test your assumptions and say, did this really work? I'll give you another example. When we were doing some work for Ateneo, we did some of their buildings there. We designed the ledges to be a little pointy so that the students don't sit on it, right? Well, they still sat on it, and I call it their bakal puwet, right? Ateneo, and and you just say, oh, yeah, it didn't work. Let's not do that again. Let's not waste that anymore. And you learn something from it. In another school, I think if it's really odd, but once you begin to enter spaces, whether it's houses or schools or hospitals, look around and you begin to understand how people use the space. And you should be able to design for that. And the nice thing about these things is, hey, this will match my client because they can do this. Or you might say, they might have to change their habits a little bit, but this is a system that's a lot better. So again, Steph, it really starts from understanding what you use a lot, what you use the least, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you other things that's very non-judgmental. Sometimes I will tell my clients, tell me what you want people to think about you when they enter your house. That's as simple as that, right? And they're taken aback. They go, what kind of question is that? No, just tell the truth. Do you want them to say you're well-traveled? Do you want them to say you're rich? Do you want them to say, that you're smart? And once they get to it, then you understand how you begin to put the space together, because it's not just how they live, but it's also sometimes when they have guests, they want to know what people think about them, right? And then so sometimes the personality of who I am versus the personality of who I am when there are guests around, just like the personality of who you are at work and your personality of your home will kind of clash. And understanding that makes really the design process really, really fun.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, I think though that's changed a lot. I found that people have been really using their home less as a showcase, but as their home because of the pandemic. Like, rooms that were otherwise the children don't go there. Like, oh, this is like all your fancy stuff and it's only for guests and your kids don't go there. Then now it's like everything is free for all for the family, right? Because this is your space. This is the space that you live in, which is how it should be. I see it a lot, like in these beautiful European homes, particularly in Germany. They have a knack for keeping their homes still looking beautiful and nice, even if they have no help. They have like 5 kids. They have like, I'm like, how do you do it? How do you do it? Right? So it's really like, but all rooms are used, all spaces maximized, and it's because they're organized. It's because the kalat, even the kids, right? They tidy up right away. The kalat goes somewhere. Like, it's just not just like left around. So really organizing is important.
It's also
I wish I were that person. I'm not.
But what's really interesting, which I found one of the most fun things for me in this pandemic, is when you watch the news and you see the background of the people's houses, like Anderson Cooper's house versus, this guy in CNN's house and everything. And what I noticed that was really interesting, some people actually bought books because they're color-coded, they're color-coordinated. So when you look at this, I'm sure you don't read those books, right? Because the books don't come in the same color, right? But their house literally was in the same color. And when you look at, you look at the background of people's houses, you begin to understand that there's just so many different ways that people personalize their space, right? And it's the understanding of that and how your kids will dirty up their room because they're 5, 6, or 7. But what will happen when they're 12, 13, 14?
How do you change it up?
Funny
anecdote about the book. So I once I worked with Isa Reyes of Neat Obsession. She came over to my house and she immediately started organizing my books that way, like color coded, right? I'm like, no, it's okay because we don't use the space is not a public space or whatever. I would rather you fix my books, what I've read and what I have yet to read and what's like in transit, diba? So parang like we rearrange the bookshelf like these are all the books I've read already, and these are the stack of books I still want to read. So it's really all about you and the homeowner. Brian, maybe you can give us a little bit of input before we wrap up this like super interesting conversation, and there's a lot of questions. I want to give enough time for the questions here.
Yeah.
Maybe I have some input on what are the things that you guys offer to help organize the home and make it seamless.
I think we can show some, photos of the closets. We've been talking a lot about
Yeah.
clothes. This example wherein everything is seen. It's see through. So as Dan was saying, we would love, to have clients who limit, you know, the clothes that they have, because in the showroom it will look like this. In the catalog it will look like this. But you have to realize, and we tell clients this, that once you're using it, it won't look like this anymore, right? So
But you know what, men can have a closet like this because shirts hang well, t-shirts fold well, shorts fold. The men's clothing lends itself well to a nice wardrobe like that. Women, we have our ruffles and silk, and it's all magulo.
yeah. But no, but this one, Pianca's system, you can choose the type of glass, right? So
Hmm.
there's a type of glass that's really see-through. There's one that has like a bronze tint, or one that stops all glass, which looks like a mirror. So it really depends on the level of, transparency, right? If you really want it to be transparent or not. But then again, we're talking about organization. Um, we really have to understand how much clothes the person has. So we try to get an inventory, just like when we design kitchens, right? We have to understand who's going to use the room. If there's two people, if it's a master bedroom, that we have to understand, okay, 60% for the wife, 40% for the guy, or vice versa. Um, or nowadays, a lot of people don't bring their shoes up anymore. So we don't put the shoe closet in the bedroom. So we create another space for that, along with architects and designers. Yeah.
Great. I mean, it's just a place for everything and everything in its place. Or in my case, covered closet. So I can just hide
Yeah.
my kalat. I like to have a clean living space with my closets medyo magulo. But anyway, so thanks so much. This has been all very, very helpful. I think one of the things that one of my key takeaways from this discussion is how important one, our health is. So making sure that we do have a clean and safe and sanitized home. And two, how function and flow is very important to our mental and emotional wellness, right? So being able to have a house where you can flow properly, that functions in accordance to your flow, is so important to being able to be, mentally and emotionally well, and to really live the way we should at home and maximize our space and our time at home. So those are the key takeaways I've had today. Thank you guys so much. And I really want to save time for these questions because right now we have quite a few. We have over 20 plus questions here. And I would like to, yeah, just read some of these questions here for you guys. Okay, so we have, let's start from the beginning. We had quite a lot. Okay, any tips for interior design or architecture board exam takers, especially for those studying from home the past year?
Don't fail. That's basically because I don't know if you noticed, I took the board exam twice. I failed it the first time. I remember reading the whole list in the newspapers, and I got home, and my dad goes, "Why didn't you pass?" I go, "I don't know." So I took it the second time. I failed history. I ended up teaching history in UST. So I guess the first one, just try not to fail. I'm sorry I can't give you tips, but the nice thing about the board exam now is it is so practical, and it's all practice driven. And I think the PRC is moving towards that direction. I think one year we had two people top the board from the office, and the PRC called us in and said, "What's wrong with you, or why do all these people from your office pass?" I go, "Because we make them utos to do all the practical things, and the board exam questions are very practical." So I would concentrate on the practical items because I know the direction of the board exam people is really for people who've done the work and done the practice, not too much theory anymore.
That's great. Yeah, that makes more sense, right? I mean, the history and theory is good to have background, but really practical architecture is really what's important, right?
Yeah,
It's
and
your
just don't
practice.
fail it because I felt really bad when I failed it the first time. All right. But
Well,
that,
you can try and try again until you get it right.
yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
This is a nice question from Thea Tan. What is the biggest design challenge in your practice at this time?
Um, it really differs and depends on the project type. I think one of the things that's really key for Thea, and thank you for that question, is as we were talking about movement, any project you do will have layers of movement systems. If it's a house, the driver will move this way. So the driver never goes to the master's bedroom.
Mhm.
The maid will move this way. The pool cleaner will move this way. The kid who's 5 will move this way. The kid who's 14 will move this way. And it's understanding how they move. And when you
Yeah.
begin to layer those movement systems, that will make the house really work. And it's the same thing for hospitals. We get that from hospitals. The janitor will move one way, the nurse will move another way, the patient will move another way, the dead patient will move another way, right? And so even people and materials have different movement systems, and understanding those movement systems will actually make you better designers.
Okay, that's great. This is another one. What hospital design strategies can you apply to make the home healthy, energy efficient, and sustainable? From Rola or Rosa Vismonte.
Good question. Yeah.
Bigger windows, cross ventilation, everything we've learned in school from day one, it really works. Permeable, minimal permeable surfaces, so harder surfaces that are not as porous will be easier to clean. Making sure that every room allows light in, so that light sterilizes the spaces. And it's not really rocket science. I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, people saying, "What do you do?" It's not rocket science. When PGH was designated as a COVID referral center, what we did is it was a donut building, and all we did was we put industrial fans from the outside to push the air into the donut, and I called it the donut hole of death. That's where all the infected air would go through, right?
No.
Because we
Okay.
didn't have time to air condition the PGH wards, right? And yeah, like the sketch here, it just shows that air movement is not rocket science. It's just basically understanding where air moves so that you can prevent cross-contamination. And in PGH, nobody got sick in those wards. They got sick outside. And then so we called it a forced air
Oh.
unilateral wind direction, right? And I'm going to be a little odd here, but it's basically that. It's basically understanding the simple principles that have been there forever. These are the same things like when we did the Ninoy Aquino that you see in the picture. We looked at the calculation of air movement. It's an engineering thing. The stadium was designed for 5,000 people. We're putting in 100 people. So your viral dilution actually makes it a lot less. And it's the ability to move air in and out of the spaces that actually makes your spaces cleaner. I mean, some people have air conditioning in their studios, right? And for the people listening, how often do you open your studio air window to vent it out? And what you should do is open your window and open your door, and that will change the air in your room in 2 seconds. But if you just open your window, then it won't change the air in your room. So if you live in a condo in your studio, open the window, open the door, and it allow air through, and your house will smell totally fresh when it's done.
Mhm.
So simple system.
Okay. This is very interesting, actually. Wow. Ventilation is really important, right? Like, especially nowadays, we've learned in terms of virus transmission, that ventilation is very
Right.
important. Here's an interesting questions from Pamela Manuel. Okay, she gave in 2 questions. Is there special training for handling hospital projects? First question. And the second question is, what would be the ideals in building a healthy home nowadays that were not considered before?
A lot of things. Sorry, are there special things? Yeah, you got to be a
Special
nerd.
like requirements.
You
Oh,
just
you
got
gotta
to be
be
a
a nerd. So
you
there's
got to
no
be a
like
nerd.
certificate or
No,
class.
it's like because I tell my students this. There are basically two ways of going through life. If someone asks you a question, you can pretend and lie and say, "Yeah, I know this," right? So if someone say, "Oh yeah, and this," and then you get away with a lie. They think you're smart, and then you leave the conversation. The other way is saying, "Stop. I don't know that, but I can Google it from my phone."
Yeah.
Right? And that's the nerdy part. Stay curious. In hospitals, I have to Google what a bone densitometer is. What does a gamma knife do? Why does a linear accelerator work when it comes in to handle cancer? We're building the first Ayala Cancer Center, the first specialty hospital.
Yeah.
And my
Amazing.
nerd research for that is like, it's like through the roof. right? And it's stay curious. And I've gotten clients who say, I don't know. In fact, when we did Medical City, when Dr. Bengtson was talking to me, he's a friend of my dad. He said, your son worked in healthcare. Can he build our hospital? I told him, I can't, but I can hire my old firm in the States, and they will teach us what to do. And that's what took us to hospital work. We knew where the experts were, tapped the experts, learned from it, kicked them out, and started doing our own thing. So just be honest with yourself and say, I don't know, but I can look for the information and I'll cut back to you. And there's nothing wrong with that.
So Medical City was one of your first, Dan?
That was our first hospital.
Locally?
First local hospital. It started when I was with Bobby Manyosa. Then we did the renovations in the second tower. Wow. But that was basically interesting because we flew a team into Madison, Wisconsin in the middle of winter. And that was kind of insane, right? But then in the team, some people have never been on the plane before. Some people have never seen snow before. And it's really nice to see. But we learned from them. And side story, there was an original design in Medical City. It doesn't look like that we worked with our American consultants. And then it was $1 billion over budget. So I went to my team and I said, we can try to make this smaller, or we can just throw everything away and let's do it from zero again, using the lessons we learned. And we did it from zero. We threw everything out, right? And we started from zero, and that allowed us to just understand it. If you learn it, you can apply it, right? So if you pretend you know it and you're lying to yourselves, you really never know it.
No.
Right?
And that's there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know, right? And just
I call it being comfortable with what you do not know. Right? And once you're comfortable with what you don't know, you have two choices. You can lie or you can look for the information. And I'd like to think people
more.
That's great. Super inspiring. All right. Her other question was, maybe Brian can answer this. Ideals in building a healthy home nowadays that were not considered before. Maybe the two of you can tag team on this question.
I think we talked about it a lot in this in this webinar. I think we start with flow, right? Trying to understand what the new flow is, coming in and going out of the house. I was talking to Dan about this, and probably considering like a room that's kind of isolated in case there's someone that you want to quarantine, that someone who goes out or who was exposed, or someone you're hiring. So maybe having a quarantine room. We talked about materials, whether we use glass or steel or non-porous stone. Instead of using marble or granite, we use glass. So these are just some, there's a lot of things, that we can talk about.
It's tracing the path, because there will always be clean, there will always be dirty, right? And sometimes you can't say it won't meet. They will always meet. But sometimes the dirty will pass through this way at 4 o'clock in the evening, and the clean will pass through there at 8 o'clock in the morning. So the paths actually all have this thing called time of use, right? So you have to understand when it's going to be used, what is the time the dirty and the clean will pass by.
Okay.
And understanding that would just allow you to combine spaces and say, you're dirty at 4 o'clock, but you're clean at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's called
that's
like, I think
excellent insight.
Sorry, I think this photo is like a mud room where when you, it's more of an American house where you enter the garage and then, there's like a mud room where you can dump the clothes that the outer layer, right, that you've been wearing. And then, that's the path before you go inside the house.
And then that's really something where, you can take advantage. Because, people leave their shoes, but you don't want to leave your shoes in the front door, diba? Yeah. And then you have inside the house shoes and you have outside the house shoes. Yeah. That's key, because you don't know what you stepped on when you're in the street, and you start tracking that in. And floor mats don't work. Maski na the pinakamahal 3M floor mat, it's still bringing the dirt. And rooms like this just allow you to take it beyond shoes. Yeah. Right. What if you come home and then you got stuck in the rain and then your bag is wet and everything? So you begin to change things. And it's I think adaptable to both here and abroad, particularly with climate and weather change and everything like that.
Yeah. And it's as simple as, if you don't have the space to have this, it's as simple as having a shoe cabinet at the entrance of your door and
Yeah.
perhaps a bin to put, your bag or your things or your dirty clothes in it, right? Like it's just dedicating a space. Doesn't have to be a whole room or whatever,
Yeah.
but dedicating a space or an area for that stuff
But
right
Steph,
at
yeah,
your
Steph,
entrance.
sorry. Do you go home and you see a trail of clothes that your kids have left behind, like
No
shoes, socks?
naman. They're not. No, actually my youngest son is quite OC.
Okay, oh,
He's
good.
Mr. like put the shoes in the
Put things
right
away.
place, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's interesting. That's again how even kids have different habits,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Mhm.
It's inborn already,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Here's a great question from Joram Miko Claudio. Okay. I have a question since our client wants to have a very nice looking kitchen, but can't afford to get a stone or solid surface for their countertop. Have you ever used or suggested to use an epoxy resin as a countertop? I saw this on YouTube. I got curious about it. What are the advantages and disadvantages of using the epoxy resin for your countertop or even in flooring? Maybe you can also suggest what are the other options that they could have that are cost effective, but great for the kitchen, easy to sanitize, easy to clean.
Okay. Well, you remember at one point in time, this industrial look was really cool and concrete floors and stuff like that. But the
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
with the concrete floors, it had to be cast at the same time, and it'll get mappy,
Hmm.
and the stone will come out. And the skill to do a really nice concrete floor would be very difficult. Just like how
Yeah.
people are copying Tadao on those exterior of his buildings with little pegs and the holes, and you tried to
Yeah.
copy it and it's couldn't done. So yes, epoxy is good, but you have to find somebody who's really good at it, because if not, it's going to look
Hmm.
like junk. That's
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Second, there are different kinds of epoxy. Sorry, this is being a nerd. And the VOCCs, the fumes that it will emit 5 years down the road.
Mm.
And you check the VOCCs
Yeah.
of the epoxy that's being used, because there are different kinds of grade epoxy. So bottom line is, yes, if you're going to do it yourself, as long as you're willing to experiment. And if your client's on a budget, I think for me, the best thing is still a 60 by 120 tile,
Yeah. Porcelain.
right?
Yeah.
Porcelain tile that
Yeah.
you can scrub down.
Yeah.
You can get a thicker, more expensive tile because they're normally more durable. And then to make sure that there's cemento underneath the whole tile, right? Because
Yeah.
when we don't turn over our projects, my piso gets pud because we make katok every tile. You go to the mall and you see all the basag tiles, right? Because there's no cemento underneath
Yeah.
that tile. So in the office, actually, they have a cane with a steel tip, and we actually touch
Tuck, tuck,
every
tuck,
tile,
tuck.
yeah, and make sure, and if it sounds hollow, we tell them replace that. And
Yeah.
that's the level of
Yeah.
the standards that we do. No, so it boils down to that ability to understand that there's a particular skill to use certain materials, and make sure that the person you hire is honest enough to say, I can do this well or I cannot do this well, and look
Yeah.
for samples of the work.
Yeah. Good, good, good. Very good advice. Okay, we do have a couple of many questions actually here. Justin Abiva Sazon, what is your take on biophilic design and how can we incorporate this concept in building a healthy home, especially with a pandemic? Maybe Brian, you want to take this?
Sorry. Can
What is your take on biophilic design and how we can incorporate this concept in building a healthy home, especially with the pandemic?
I think that means plants, right?
Yes,
Am
yeah.
I correct?
All
Okay.
the plantitos and plantitas
Yeah.
out there that have become, plant
We
lovers.
recently, we had a kitchen designed by, Chef Carlo Craco,
Hmm.
who's one of the top Michelin star chefs in Milan. And his design is actually more of an open kitchen with shelving at the back. And
Yeah.
in the shelving, there's like pots for like herbs and stuff. But it's more related, to the kitchen. So, you guys, for the people who cook, you just get your herbs directly from there and then you can use it right away. But in terms of actual plants, maybe you guys are better equipped to to answer that question, Dan or
Yeah.
Steph.
I mean, the whole idea of biophilic design is incorporating landscape into your spaces, which, we're in the tropics. We do that all the time, right?
Yeah.
But now it's being incorporated into the buildings. Manyosa in JMT incorporated
Mhm.
plant boxes in the JMT building in Ortigas, right? And that's a really nice building when it's all planted. Yes and good, galing. But there is a technical side of that. And the technical side is what kind of soil do you use, right? So what kind of
Yes.
waterproofing when you irrigate. But there's something that people forget also. is when you do biophilic design, when you're bringing dirt in, those dirt has friends, and those friends will enter your house.
Insects. Yeah.
Yeah, or termites, right?
Termites.
And
Yeah.
so what happens, we've done a lot of repair of houses where the anay came in from the potted plants,
Ah,
right?
They
So
actually have these special foam, I forgot what they're called, but they're like foam spongy soil. Um that it's actually not soil, it's soilless
it's a
soil.
volcanic ash. It's a lightweight soil, and then there are lightweight soil roof deck garden systems. We used it in Medical City. Underneath
Yeah.
Medical City is the most expensive equipment, the MRI and everything, But then it's a lightweight soil that has styrofoam that retains water, and then levels of volcanic ash, and then soil and everything. Because soil gets hard, right?
Yes.
And so
Actually,
you have to do the right soil.
it's like a soilless soil. It's like it looks like
Cocoa peat or coconut fiber.
no, no. I have it at home. Okay, I'm gonna try and find it. It's like
Okay.
a hydroponic. It's the sort of. It looks like a sponge, and what it does is it's. It'll come back to me. It's like made of charcoal, I think, and all these other nutrients, and it looks like a sponge. And basically, it's amazing because I have these sort of air hanging plants, and you can just put it in water, and then it absorbs all the water, then you take it out and then you hang it, and when it dries out again, you just put it in water again, and it's not soil at all. It feels
Like
like
a
a
gel.
sponge. No,
Like a
like
sponge.
a sponge. Yeah, they're called nursery blocks or something like that.
Oh,
So yeah. A very, yeah, it's like a sponge. It's in hydro what they use in hydroponics. So
yeah.
that might be a good solution in terms of not having the pests and the termites and the things, because you're not getting it from outside, right? It's cleaner, I guess, for the home in that sense. We have another one here. Actually, there's so many questions. This is a good one from Bernadette Tang. Thank you for the wonderful talk. During the pandemic, touchless design is becoming a trend. I want to ask your opinion on designing for the blind, who usually rely on the sense of touch for wayfinding.
what a great question. One of
Yeah.
my second year or third year design problems in UST was designing a house for a blind person. And one of the prerequisites in that particular project was to read Helen Keller,
Mm-hmm.
right? And again, it's the whole process of putting you in the mindset of a blind person, right? And if you read Helen Keller, if she could hear and she could see, then she got meningitis, then she became deaf and blind, and then in the process of her learning to equate water with signs and everything else, it's fantastic. There's actually a movie on it. And so what happens is once you be able to understand what you're designing for and who you're designing for, then it becomes easier to come up with
Mm-hmm.
innovative ideas. And so when designing for facilities for the blind, there's certain things you have to remember. One is repetitive actions is what they will use. You're not gonna tell the blind person walk this way and then put a chair in that path the next day,
Yeah.
right? So it's repetitive action. The second is tactile, so you can do smoother textures versus rougher textures in the wall. So if he's touching the wall and it becomes rougher, then you're in the kitchen,
No.
things like that. So you're dealing with texture. Then you
Amazing.
start dealing with sound. So if the person is tapping his cane on the floor and it sounds hollow, it's a wooden floor, then you're in the dining room. But when it becomes cement and it becomes a little stickier, then you're in the garage. And so as he moves his cane around, you begin to say that the sound, not only the ability of the cane to touch things, but the
Yeah.
ability to hear what the cane actually taps on, can now begin to send clues in terms of how to design that house. And then you think about smell and sound, right? And so what happens, smell is a bit more difficult, but sound can be, put a water fountain. And as you approach the water fountain that's bubbling nicely and say, I'm closer to the water fountain,
Mm.
I'm in the kitchen or I'm in, whatever. And so understanding all of that and making sure that you can design for all the senses of this blind person. And one of the things I did in UST is I got my students and they buddied up and we blindfolded them. And we told them we to walk from one point of the campus to the other,
Amazing.
right? And they buddied up. So the one guy was blind and the other guy was the guide. And then the other person was the guide and the other guy was blind. And that just opened up the whole sensory idea of how design and the whole idea of designing with all your senses becomes really important. So it's a fun exercise, but it's fun that you can actually pretend
It's
and
like
say,
taking it to the next level, like try to understand what the client is looking for, putting yourself in their
in their
shoes.
shoes.
Talagang literally putting a blindfold on, and it's very
Right.
good.
And I remember when I did that as a design exercise, my students were complaining, right? But
Mag-aaral
they
na ako architecture, dad. I'll
yeah, but
study
they came up
MBA.
with fantastic solutions. And
Yeah.
one of the nice things about teaching is you learn more from them than sometimes they learn from you.
Yeah.
So all these exercises are actually designed to make your senses aware. And it's not even just touch, it's temperature. So it's not rough and smooth, it's hot and cold.
Yeah.
Right? It's where sometimes if you're sensitive enough, sometimes you can, how people play mahjong and they can tell what piece that is.
Yeah.
Right?
May daya.
Right? And
Yeah.
so that's kind of interesting because even just be able to sense wind direction. Sometimes you'll go on a site and show some grass in the air and see where the wind moves. Right? And you do that in your house. You do that everywhere else. You come to understand all these senses come together because you are designers of environments and we are here to design every aspect of the environment.
Amazing. And just sort of incorporating and trying to really integrate what this person experiences into your design. I think that's really, I guess, the key takeaway from that, right?
Right. And also the key takeaway, sometimes what I know is not correct. And I have a hard time with that also. Sometimes I think I'm correct. Then a couple of years, I'm super wrong. Sorry, I was so wrong. Right. And sometimes you just have to learn that, yeah, you're not right all the time.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so humility, very important. I want to choose one of the questions here. He was quite active earlier in the comment section as well. It's John Adam Dakigan. Okay, so he actually has three questions, but maybe let's take his first question, which is insights on how we can democratize modularity architecture. And sort of like 3D printing or printout architecture. So what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, as early as the 80s and 90s or in the 70s, architect was God, right? I will come in and I will change things. I don't care what my client spends for it. Tear down that wall, I don't like it anymore. Architect is God. And that has changed because now it's moving to a direction where architect is liable and architect is lawyer, right? And so you begin to understand that changed the whole dynamic. The nice thing about 3D printing is that you're right, you can make a design and you can sell it and it can make people's lives better and you can make money out of it, right? And so you're looking at volume and speed and everything else. But what's the unhidden part about sharing your work is the more people play with your stuff, the more people use your spaces, the more you can understand, did I get it right or did I get it wrong? Right? Because they will test the spaces for you, right? And when they do test the spaces for you, you say, I got this wrong. I can do the next one better. It's like, some people will buy a 20,000 peso shirt and use it once a year, right? I will, if I have a shirt like that, I'll use it every day, right? But it's just understanding that there's a certain quality to these shirts that allows you to use it every day. And it's just the same thing. There's a certain quality of design that allows you to learn from it and understand I got this wrong or I can do this better. I can tweak this in the next project and not just do the same thing. One of the things when I talk to my staff, sometimes I'll say, we did that now before. Let's do something new, right? And I call it tamad architecture. You're tamad lang, diba? So example, your vinyl is the same price. It's for the same color. But if I had 10 colors of vinyl and I do a pattern on the floor, that floor will be super galing, right? What did it cost me or what did it cost the client? It's the same price for the vinyl. A blue vinyl is the same price as the yellow vinyl. But the fact that you touched that material and put it into your design and made it yours, made that 10 peso vinyl 100 pesos because you touched it.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, interesting. So it's really all about having a fresh take on how you build things and the quality behind it, of course.
And it's like, yeah, I've done that before. Let's do something else. Because sometimes we're on a rush. We'll go to you have a dinner, Steph, and you don't have time to cook. You're gonna go to your standby.
Yes.
Yeah, the dish that you've cooked 10 times or 100 times before because you know you'll do it. But when you have time during the pandemic, you started playing with the food, right? And that's it's not that you're tamad. It's just sometimes we just fall into the pattern that we're used. And sometimes you just say, hey, I've already fed this prawns. Let's do prawns with adobo or something and do something else for the next thing.
Correct. Fantastic. Okay, we can wrap up with the last question. And then we'll get your final tips and comments and sort of words of wisdom from the two of you. From Anna Larisa Dolor, this is a very good question. Do you have any tips for a healthy home or sustainable ideas for common houses located right inside highly urbanized cities? So this is true that lots of people living in dormitories and common houses, sharing spaces. Where not everyone is fortunate enough to have their own space. So this would be a very welcome input.
Okay. First of all, understand what is good and bad about that space. Period.
Mhm.
It can be in the middle of socialized housing. It could be in the middle of informal settlements, right? But
Yeah.
understand what is good and what is bad, because there will always be something good and bad with that space, right? And then understand what you can change and what you cannot change. If you can't change, don't even kill yourself trying to come up with a solution. But once you understand what is good, what you understand what you can change, then you start manipulating the walls that make the room and begin
Hmm.
to say, I'm going to work with this wind flow.
Yeah.
This neighbor here is mabaho and his basuras there, so I'm not going to put a window there. Things like
Yeah.
that. And then understand that what you can and cannot do. So it's not because rich people have all this space and all this money. No, it's not that. It's a fact that if you understand, and I said it sounds corny, but if you understand, I call it the givens, what you
Hmm.
can and cannot touch. Once you understand what you can touch, then touch it and play with it and make it better. And don't even waste your time killing yourself about the things you cannot change.
Yeah.
If example, this is my joke. I tell this in my lecture. If you're not very tall and you know you cannot change your height, then make sure all your friends are shorter than you, but you're the tallest in your group. If you're not very good looking and you can't afford belo, make sure all your friends are pangit, right? So that you're the best looking in your group. It's just basically understanding what you can and cannot do.
Mm.
Yeah.
So how about just digging in a little bit more into this question? Because I'm sure it's like a lot of people are experiencing this. Like if you are sharing a space with somebody, and let's say you're four people in a studio, what are some of the tips that you can give them to make sure that perhaps you have roommates who are not as clean or
Okay.
healthy? Some tips to at least make your home that healthy home that we're looking for.
Number one, make sure you have at least two roommates,
Mm.
not two in the room. Three in the room is better. Why? Because if it's two in the room, you're going to kill each other. If you're
Mm.
three in the room and sharing the room, then you can bounce off ideas to the third person,
Okay.
right? And it's basically that. You know the old saying that you don't know how galing your husband or boyfriend or girlfriend is until you travel together, right? And if there's only two of you traveling together, you're gonna kill each other, right?
Hmm.
But when there's a third, it has a tendency for the other person to behave.
Mm.
And so share a room with three people. Now, if it's sharing a room with two people, and your roommate is not particularly neat, get a new roommate. Unless you're related to them or you're married to them, then there's really nothing else you can do. Just get a new roommate. Just move out. Keep yourself sane. It's not worth the trouble of trying to change your habits, because they will not change your habits. And that
Mm.
is understanding what you can change and what you cannot change.
That's true. That's true. You can clean as much as you can. If they're makalat, they will always be makalat or madume,
Yep.
right? Okay. Well, thank you so much. We are gonna wrap this up in a bit, and I still want your final inputs from you guys, but I definitely want to announce, of course, the winners today. So don't log off yet. We're gonna have our words of wisdom, final words of wisdom from the two of you. I just want to announce the winners of our hand soap. We have a hand soap and room spray set. Rola Orosa Vismonte, Pamela Manyo, and Anna Dolor. Okay. And then the winner of the sketch is Bernadette Tang. So, congratulations to our winners. Thank you guys for being such a participative audience. We had over 100 participants and viewers today. So, that's super great. I wanted to thank everyone for being here today. And before we go, I want to hear last few words from Brian. Brian, can you share?
Sure. I thank you, Steph. Thank you for hosting today. This was our first Mod Talks with you. And thank you for doing such a good job and for spending time with us. I wanted to thank everyone who's watching today live. I know a lot of you're busy. You took time out of your busy schedules to watch this. I hope it was informative. I hope you learned something out of it. And, I hope to see you guys again in the next Mod Talks. But most importantly, Dan, I wanted to say thank you to you personally. Hopefully soon, we see each other, you share a meal, do coffee or dinner. Um, your work is truly inspiring. This particular talk, I learned that it's not just about technical stuff, or it's not just about design, but it's also about practicality and sometimes to a certain degree common sense, right? And being confident in saying if you don't know, the answer, right? I think that's very important. That's a very important takeaway. So thank you so much for your time, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and thank you,
Brian.
Steph. This was really a lot of fun. Oh, can I just side kwento on the sketch that the person won?
Please.
So when I'm in meetings, I do these doodles, right? And these doodles, this actually came from a sketchbook. I think that sketch came from a time when we were designing a hospital in Fujairah in the UAE, right? And the title is actually Corbusier with a piece of cheese. Why is it? I just wanted to have fun with it. So I hope you had fun. And if I die and I become famous, then it might be worth a lot of money. So congratulations.
Architect Dan, before you sign off, any words of advice for the people who are watching here? So whether they are design enthusiasts like us or professionals like you, any words of advice on the healthy home, or even just pursuing your career in general? You've been so inspiring.
I think easy. Just don't lie. Just don't tell a lie. We can fib the truth a little bit, right? But don't lie. Don't lie to yourselves. Don't lie to your clients, and just be really comfortable and say, I'm not stupid. I'm smart, and I'm smart enough to know that I know where to look for the information, right? Yes. And then if not, then ask for, because architects are arbiters. We're not just designers. We're arbiters, right? So sometimes, we'd have to be in between the contractor and the client, or in between the husband and the wife, and stuff like that. And so what happens is you just have to make sure that you're giving the best advice, because that is our job. We provide a service, and our service is to provide not only building information, but a lot of other things to make the spaces work. And have fun. Have fun with life.
Yeah. Wow. Very great advice. I think anybody can, I would say, adopt these words of wisdom, whether or not you're an architect or not, just sort of, like you said, to echo what Dan said about don't lie, especially don't lie to yourself. If you don't know the answer, go find it, or go find an expert. Lots of collaborations happening nowadays, and with a lot of mutual respect for other experts in a field that you are not good at, then that's where all the magic happens. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for joining us today. This was a great episode of MODTalks. I was so inspired by everybody. Please, here we've got Flash. You can follow Architect Dan at Archion Architects, and of course you can follow at Modularity Home, at Scavolini Manila, at Val Cucina Manila, and at Pianca Store Manila. And if you would like to follow me, I am at Stephanie Zubiri on Instagram. Thank you guys again, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Julia has always dreamt of a desert island. So that's what we've given her. For Clive, who loves an adventure, we've imagined new ways of living. And then there's Susan, who can never relax. We've found a place for her to offload all her troubles. For Luke, with his sophisticated ways, we've ensured everything is within arm's reach. And for Anne and Mark's wedding, we've even dealt with the rings. Your aspirations have challenged us to grow. From the kitchen to the bathroom, the walk-in closet and even the living room, together we've become a home. Scavolini, Italy's favorite for 60 years.